Hello everyone, welcome to the day one for our new latest live training of a combination of Selenium with Python and RobotFramework. Let's start with our day one. So primarily team, in the orientation session, I gave you a quick rundown as to what is going to be happening within this session that we have, right? So we talked about the different topics that we're going to be working and so on. So primarily our focus is going to be on mastering Selenium, how the whole concept of automation testing works with Selenium WebDriver, and then going into the Python programming basics. And finally, we will get to our robot framework and look at the detailed aspects of it. So for today's session, our primary agenda, or rather for the next few sessions, is going to be around this theme. Just like what we discussed within our Selenium orientation session, opportunities, what happened here? We will start with a lot about element identification in Selenium IDE in the first two sessions, and then we will get to the WebDriver commands. So at a very high level for training, all right, so the first few topics team is going to be around Selenium IDE along with element identification and automation testing basics. That is what we're going to do for the first few sessions. From there, we will get into some Selenium WebDriver concepts. But before we do that, we need to attach a programming language, and hence we'll look at Python programming basics, then Selenium WebDriver concepts, and how can we develop a simple data-driven framework using Selenium WebDriver and Python. So this will set up our entire skill set that is then needed for us to go advanced. These are fundamentally the basic topics that we all need to master before we get into the detailed automation frameworks. After which, we'll start looking at robot framework and understand how that works. Somewhere between these, we will also understand various types of automation frameworks and the differences between them. So once we understand this topic, it will become easy for us to analyze as to how robot framework has been built and how can it help us in our career going forward. So here are the high level topics team that we're going to focus at. So like I said, the first one is going to be on Selenium IDE and element identification. So let me put up a new one out here, and I'll call this as project 1 Selenium IDE and element identification. So to do this first project, I'm going to give you a quick scenario. Let's talk about a test case, a simple test case that we look as manual testers. So any test case, one of the simplest formats that you can see will be about things like what is the test case ID that is unique to identify it, what is the description for it, what are the test steps, then the expected result, actual result for each step, and finally a result as to if it's a pass or a fail. So here is how we go about building anything from a manual standpoint. We're still not talking about automation in a detailed way. We're talking about as manual testers, how do we look at things? All right. So in this case, let's take an example of an application that we can use to work with. We can take any simple application that we work very regularly as. So that will give us some good kind of a overall idea about how things work for us. So let's take more of the application which we can start with. It's got a very simple UI, and that will be our interact.com/app. I hope you all are aware of Interact. Anyone in the audience who's not aware of Interact as an application that we've been using? I'm talking to Interact. Whenever you have a comment, team, or a question, you can always share the information with me over the chat, and that's how we'll communicate. So I'm going to look at the questions in a different screen here. So let me give an overall idea of the application, what it does, and then we can get to this. It is very, very important, team, for us to understand the functionality as the automation testers or manual test engineers, even before we get to the detailed levels of how we can test it, how we can start to work with it. So Interact is a free application that helps trainers to communicate with the trainees. It is like a messaging platform. What it primarily does is serve the purpose of instant messaging in a very, very specific manner. The way it works is any institute which does online trainings or even offline trainings, they come in and they set up an account. Once they set up an account, they start to add the training courses that they offer. They enter the course name, give it a course icon. Then they add the trainers who are associated with that specific course, give their details and provide a profile pic and so on. And finally, they add the trainees and link them to each course. So we add courses, we add trainers, and then the trainees. The second step is where the institute admin or the trainer is able to log in and send a notification. Notification is as simple as an email where we say to which course or which set of students are we sending a notification. What is the category, which I'll tell you briefly about it. And then we add a subject and a message body to it and send it across. The category is basically different types of information that says what kind of a message is it. So even before a trainee opens up the message that comes up, they're able to figure out if this is an important message or it's a reminder or there's an exercise within it or there's an event that we are trying to promote or there's a file that we're sharing and so on. So the categories give us an option to say what kind of a message that is. And finally, when it is broadcasted, the trainee gets to receive it through the email. The trainee also sees it on their mobile devices as to like a mobile app using a notification and a push alert. They can also log into the web browser and take a look at it. That is primarily what this app is. We are currently in a beta phase with a lot of updates that have come in. Now to get to the app itself, we talk about interrupt.com/app as the URL. And out here we have the login feature. A login feature where I can log in as an institute, as a trainee, as a trainer, and be able to look at a lot of features. So here is a login. I enter the username and password and I click on login and I'll be able to see a lot of information. So for example, on September 26th, we've published some details about our test environment. On September 23rd, we sent some information to our Selenium live training project batch for the August 2016. And we have some updates there, so we send that. So all these informations that we want to communicate, we use this app to be able to send it. And you can see the courses, the trainers, the trainees, and so on. So we're going to use this app extensively, not only to communicate within our own training team, but we will also use it to be able to work on multiple projects that we have. All right. So here is that simple app that I was talking about. Now let's talk about a simple test case where a user comes to interact.com/app, clicks on login, enters a username password, clicks on login, and let's say that I enter something random which is not there or incorrect. So let's say I enter things like KK and some random password, and I click on login. And when I enter incorrect information, what I expect to see is this message called login authentication failed. These are the few steps for my test case. So I'm going to call this test case as iapt for interrupt underscore login underscore tc001. This is a unique name that I'm trying to give to my test case. The description is incorrect login. So when a user enters incorrect login, what happens? First step is open app. Second step is to click on login. Third, enter username. Enter password. Click on login. Then verify error message. These are the different steps within it. So if I say that, hey, these are the different steps, and if I tell you that manually, can you execute these steps? Is this information enough when I pass it along to a group of team members within my QA organization so they can also execute the same test case? Do you think it is sufficient or not, team? Can everyone tell me, please? What do you think? Are these details sufficient for us to be able to execute this test case in a uniform manner when I pass it across? Exactly. We need some kind of a test data. If we don't have test data, we don't know what the user is entering. Open app, but where is this app? I'll say that application is interact.com/app. But won't it always be this way? No, not necessarily. Because we may be testing it on a test server or a dev server or a different hosting server before we test it on live. So we need the exact URL. For clicking on login, it is straightforward. We don't require test data. But for enter username, I require some data. I'll say KK is the username. For entering password, also I'll say here is my password. Okay, I'll just keep it very simple. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Click on login also, I don't require test data. Verify error message. Yes, I require because I need to verify exactly what the error message is. Now it makes a much more concrete test case which has all the steps. At these points, I really don't require an expected result and an actual result. I don't need to go to that extent because I'm not testing each and every feature within this page. It is as is. So let me delete these two columns. Or simply I'm going to hide these two columns. I don't require it right now. But as manual test engineers, you are able to quickly execute this and be able to perform it. When it comes to automation, there are specific reasons why we do automation testing team. All right. The three most common factors or reasons why we do automation testing, I put them under a category of E, R, and A. They have to be efficient, they have to be reusable, and they have to be accurate. As manual test engineers, we require some amount of time to execute any test case. So if I do it as automation or using a tool, then it has to be much faster. All right. As manual testing, it uses our human time and resource to be able to execute. As automation testing, it should use fewer resources, be it system, be it people, the amount of time we spend to do it, even that should be low. Reusable is more because use it multiple times. So we build it one time, but we run it number of times. So we have this repeating. So especially when it comes to regression testing, this specific factor plays a vital role. All right. So this is how we talk about reusability. And finally is accuracy. Accuracy is the fact that it has to be accurate. End of the day, if we do something manually and we're trying to automate, it has to get closer to that mark of satisfaction that yes, 99.97% this test case, automation test case that we did is accurate. These are the kind of details or depth to which we'll need to get into when we talk about automation testing. Efficiency, reusability, and accuracy. All right. Everything that we do will widely fall in these categories. Now, for us to be able to automate such a simple process that is used for functional testing of a given web-based application, we have many such tools and technologies that we can use. One of the most prominent one is that Selenium IDE or Selenium WebDriver testing. So Selenium homepage is seleniumhq.org, and under this you'll notice that there are two primary components to it, Selenium IDE and Selenium WebDriver. Selenium IDE is a tool that gets attached with your Firefox as an add-on, and it is very easy for you to start testing with it. Now, to get Selenium IDE onto your system, you just have to go to your download Selenium out here and look at Selenium IDE plugins. Just do a search out here. There's so many things. When we come to WebDriver, I'll show you the remaining things, but out here. Selenium IDE, download latest related version from addons.mozilla.org. So go to the downloads on seleniumhq.org and click on this link that I just showed you, and you should be able to do it on your Firefox. So this add-on works only with Firefox. This does not work with everything. All right. So out here, I'm going to quickly do an Alt and it will show me the toolbar. And once you've installed it, you should see Selenium IDE out here. You all notice Selenium IDE, everyone? And in here, I just want to get it back to HTML, talk about this format. Here is how a typical Selenium IDE tool looks. All right. The version that I'm using right now is 2.91. I don't know if it is latest. Maybe we've got something more latest. Looks like the same thing, 2.911.1. Maybe a few simple changes that have happened with it. Okay. Now, this specific IDE is a tool that helps us to A, record and run test cases, B, to write our own test cases, and C, by default it gives everything to us in a HTML format, and then we can change it into different programming formats that we require. All right, those are the main things. So I'm going to write somewhere here. Just call this as notes. So to download and install, please visit The first 3-4 sessions team are very critical, and that's the reason I'll take it very slowly. I will not hurry up into it. Okay. Selenium IDE helps to record and run simple tests, simple automation tests. 3. Write our own automation test cases. C. Help to migrate to Selenium WebDriver using various programming/scripting languages. This is the main purpose that we get from Selenium IDE. Alright. So at this point you will notice that it is a record is on. So what it does, and we'll look at some of these features very briefly, is it gives us the ability to say that whatever I do in my web-based application, it will try and capture here. So what is the primary test case? We want to go to interapp.com/app. That is the first thing. Now do notice on my Selenium IDE, I have it to one side of the screen and my web-based application to the other side, and the record button is pushed in. So if you take your mouse, it says now recording. So now let's click on login, and it will tell you that first it has done something called open and says it's app, and then some other command here called click and wait, and we'll understand this. And I want to enter something. So I said KK as the username. Password is 123QWE. And then we click on login. Right? And finally, I want to verify that this message is there. So far it has performed some steps. I'm going to stop this recording. Now we have created a recording based test case. So whatever we did as a human, as a manual process, the automation tool using Selenium IDE has learned it. So the way this UI looks is very simple. It's got a menu bar. It's got a few buttons and controls out here. It talks about an important component called base URL, which is pointing to the application. On the left side is something called as the test case views as to what test cases we are using. So now it says untitled. If I right click and say properties, instead of saying untitled, I will call this as IAF_login_TC001. Just like how we named it in our Google Drive. Now on this right side out here is the key part, where what are the different steps that are there in the test case, what each and everything does out here, and it will give us a high level idea as to here are the different steps to be performed. On the bottom we have something called as a log. So when we run a code test, you will see if there's any issue that will come up out here. And reference is like a help manual. It is a reference manual for us to understand what each thing does. What we need to remember, team, are three things: command, target, value. But before we get to these three things, let's do something called as a run. So playing the current test case or running is a way through which we are telling the application to execute this test case again. So if you noticed, everyone, looks like the execution is completed. How do we know that? You will see a green or a red or a combination of green and red out here. It says that we ran one test, it is green, and there are 0 failures in it. Okay. And in the command portion of it, you will see each and every step has become a light green color. So it tells us that the test case is executed. Now there are three components to this test case that I was talking about. In fact, to do any kind of an automation, there are two main questions that we need to answer. One is, what is it that we want to do? The what portion of it. All right. The second is where we need to perform that activity. If I need to teach a tool or a robot or a system to try and execute what we're doing manually, I need to teach it exactly what to do. It is giving the perfect exact instructions that, hey, do this A, B, C, D. If I don't provide the correct information, the systems and tools will fail. They will not perform what we want it to. And hence, they will stop execution at that point. I need to say what we need to do and where we need to do. What is like a command team, like open a browser, click a link, or click a button, or enter some text value, or select from a list item, close the browser, and so on. The different actions that we perform comes under what? And this is what Selenium calls as command. The command that is needed to perform this. Okay. Where is some kind of an identification? An identification that tells me that, hey, let's identify this by using a methodology. Now, how do you and I identify team? If I tell you that, hey, this is what we need to be doing, how do you and I identify? How do you know where to click, what to do? How do you know? What is your point of reference at this point? These topics are very important, team. I've seen a lot of people assuming that, you know what, it's very basic as of now. So it looks simple and easy, but it will miss, if you miss to, get into that expert level, it becomes a problem. I told, for example, in this test case, open an application called interrupt.com. I said, click on login. You're looking at these steps. By looking at the steps, is it enough for you to identify what you have to do? As humans, we can, because we're smart, we can see that click on login. Where is click on login? So once I go out here, I know that it is not here, it is not here, it is not here. It is this button. We usually click on buttons or links, and that is what Karthik may be referring to. Let's click on this login, right? Similarly, to enter username, how do we know where to enter username? It is not the field here, this one, forgot password or login. It is this field. That's where we enter username. So for humans, since we've been working with applications for such a long time, it's easy. Okay, but let us assume a little kid who's like maybe 4 years or 5 years has some basic idea of computers but has never worked on a web-based application, does not know how to log in or something. They just know how to play around. If you give the same information to them, will they be able to execute? No, because they'll not know where is login, or they can't read and they cannot do it. So they are ignorant to these instructions. And that is the reason Selenium needs to understand those steps as well. Command, if you look at, are what we need to do. Open. What is open? Once I select that, you can see under reference, it will tell you what it does. Opens a URL in that test frame. Click and wait. What does it do? Clicks on a link, button, checkbox, or radio button. If the action causes a new page to load, it will wait for the page to load. Type, what does it do? You enter a value in a text box. You put something into an input field. Same command, next type, and finally click and wait. And here is the target. So the command, is it clear for everyone what it does? So the three things: command, target, value. We're looking at that. You all understand what command does? Sorry guys. Do you all understand what I was saying? Do you understand what command does? Please interact with me through the chat, everyone. Guys, do you all understand? You have to say yes or no in the chat. There's so many of you, dozens of you in this session. You have to start interacting because the biggest investment that you're doing for this program is not just the money that you're putting in, it's your time and your effort. All right. So the command is what kind of an action that the user performs. That is what it is. Okay. Now target is how we identify. All right. So how do we identify anything out here? So we talked about this. Now we'll talk about element identification. We are able to visually identify, but for someone else, they need to identify it specifically. How does, when you log into Facebook or Gmail or something, how do they know that it is you who's logging in and to show you that relevant information? They know that you have to give a username and a password, which is the right combination. Only then they'll let you log in, correct? In this case, what happens is Selenium IDE looks through the HTML code, or in fact, this is a concept called DOM, okay, to identify elements. Now, when we say elements, everything that you see in a web-based application is treated as an element, be it a simple text, be it an image, an icon, a text or a heading, a field, a radio button, any buttons, anything that you see are called as elements. Okay. Selenium IDE looks through the HTML code to identify elements, and it picks up based on these criteria. First, it will look at an attribute, or we also can call this as a property that is pointing to something called as an ID or name. All right. So to talk about ID or name, it's very simple thing. Let's say out here, okay, I need to find out where is this, what did we have in the ID? Let's see, link equals login, okay, that's fine. ID is here, yeah. So I need to find out how to identify this username. So here it says ID equals user underscore login. Where does it get this information from? By looking at this HTML code. How can I look at the HTML code for any web-based application team? Always hear very closely what I'm asking, because my questions will be very specific. Your answers should be exactly apt for it. How can I look at the code that is written for this web-based application? So what you do is you right click and you say view page source. Okay, view page source will show you the entire HTML code for this application and how the UI of this application has come up based on the code that we gave. Okay, so out here you'll notice the whole code for this application is there as part of this specific total code that we can see here. Okay, so everything that we do is out here team. But then I need to look at a specific element in that code. I don't need to do everything in this. I need to do a specific, I need to observe a specific element. How do I do that? For that, what we do is we should download a tool called Firebug for Firefox. What Firebug does, team, is it gives us the ability to look at the HTML code and specifically point to each element. So this is again a utility that comes attached to your Firefox. You all must have heard that Selenium is a cross-browser testing platform. So how do we then do it across Chrome and so on? Once we move away from Selenium IDE and get into WebDriver, then we'll be able to really interact and talk about how we work with cross-browser testing and so on. Okay, Firebug will give you the ability to look deeper into the code and get the information. So all you have to do is install Firebug for your Firefox, and then you should see this kind of an icon in your toolbar, or when you right click on the specific element, you can also see an option called inspect element with Firebug. When I click on this, it will take me to the code exactly pertaining to that field. And if I keep going through the code, it will tell me, it will point to me what each of these is doing. For example, I have my mouse out here. It is highlighting the login as the heading in that form. And if I keep going down out here, it is what it is. So here is the overall code thing. Let me copy this code and show it to you in a much more detailed fashion. Alright, here is a simple HTML code. Any HTML code that you notice has few things. HTML tag followed by attribute name 1 equals attribute value 1, and we repeat this a few times. HTML tag attribute name 1 followed by attribute value 1, then name 2, value 2, and so on. And we end the HTML tag, we may have some text for that, and finally we say this is the end of that HTML tag. This is the simplest format in which we write down any kind of a HTML element. So all that you see in the web pages is built across such kind of a code. So if you look at this div out here, this is the tag. Div is the HTML tag, attribute name is class, and the value is site content. That is all that you need to know. You're not trying to master HTML to become web developers, but get some basic idea that will help us in automation. And this format is the most basic idea that you can get to work with. So I'm going to put this also into a notes document. All these documents, team, I will be sharing it with you at the end of each project. So we're talking about this as a project 1. So at the end of project 1, I'll be sharing this complete sets of document along with the code that we generated within our system. In the meanwhile, as you're seeing the recorded videos, you can go through them and get a good idea. All right. So in this case, what it is looking at is that ID or name attribute is the key identifier for that specific element. If I say ID equals user underscore login or name equals log, it should be able to identify if it is unique. In this case, what it did in this step is it said ID equals user underscore login. And you notice here is the command, here is the target, here is the value that we're putting into that field. What do we want to do? We want to type KK in this user login field. That is what we want to do. All right. So if we want to be able to execute this and put that information, I need to identify where that element is. So one of the first ways is to say that an ID has a unique value that is enough to identify, and it's called user underscore login. So if I highlight that specific step and say find, and if my application is open on the right side or it's open at the same time, it will highlight that specific field. The same for password, and it will highlight and say find. How about this click and wait link equals login? Can it identify it? Is it blinking anything? It is not blinking anything. Why? You can look at log and it will tell you that that specific locator is not found. Link equals login is not found. Why is it not found? Can someone tell me please? Why is it unable to find this? When we ran it, it worked. Why is it not able to find it right now? The reason being, we are in a different page altogether. We are in a page where we enter the login information. If we are in the initial page where we have this here, then I say find, I'll be able to find that. Now it blinks and highlights. But once I go to that login page, I cannot. So we have used a simple way saying ID equals user underscore login, and it identifies. I can write my own step here team. Like the earlier, I can say type, and I can say now name equals, what was the user field here, inspect element with Firebug, name equals log. So I am writing a custom statement in IDE, not a record, and seeing if I can find it. So even this way I'm able to find it. So to identify an element, we have multiple ways of doing it. It is like I can identify a participant using their phone number or their email address or their first name, combination of first name, last name. I'm able to identify any participant in this training. And that is the reason that we have multiple ways to identify. We just need to figure out which way we should take. So the first and foremost is attribute property ID or name. The next one is link text. If it is a link, then we use a property of that specific link and say, hey, the text for that link is so and so. Now let's use that. The other way is to use CSS identifier and XPath identifier. Right? So I want each of you to go through a set of videos on these specific topics. It's about, I believe, 1.5 to 2 hours overall, that goes in deep and says how to identify using XPath or CSS or link text or ID or name. And I will show you the video tutorials for this. I will share that link with you over the email, and I want you all to watch it, please. I believe those are premium videos only, which is there for the paid members. Since this is still the demo sessions, not all of you may have access to it. But once you get access to it, I want you to go through it. Now let's continue with our test case and understand how we do it. So the first test case that we wrote out here, we did a simple record. Now, if I want to create a new test case, and let's change this to iaft underscore login underscore tc002. Okay. So instead of doing a record and run, let us see if we can do something on our own. The same test case, but at the what we didn't do in the first test case is after click and wait, we did not verify if we getting that error message saying that login authentication failed. In this test case, we will do that. So what is our first command, team? In the test case, what is the first command? Let's look at briefly again our simple steps. Open the application, click on login, enter username and all that. We have to open. What do we open? Open is a command that will help us to open or go to a specific URL in that window. Do I need to provide any value for that? One. I need to provide exactly the URL for it. But if you notice, we already have something called as a base URL. Base URL is the main web page URL. Within that, if we have a sub URL for that specific application, at that point, we put just what is that target. So in this case, it is /app. That's it. So we go to interapp.com and then we navigate to /app out here. What is the next command? I need to click on this link. How do I do it? So you go to inspect element with Firebug and see what is this link all about. By looking at this HTML code, we should be able to identify what type of an element is it. Is it a text field? Is it a button? Is it a URL? Is it a link and so on? How do we know if this is a link or not, team? By looking at this code. The HTML tag. Let me ask you this question, which is even more simple. You remember this format? I said it's less than HTML tag, and finally we use greater than at the end, right? This is how we write a simple HTML code. So the first thing that comes after the less than symbol is the HTML tag for any element. In this case, by looking at this text, can you tell me what is the HTML tag? Can you mention please what is the HTML tag? It is A. As simple as you looking here and saying, for any of you team who wish to get a much better idea on HTML, fundamentals and basics, I would strongly recommend go to w3schools.com. In this, you have got some simple, easy to learn tutorials on HTML. And this should give you a significant idea on how HTML is done. Hypertext markup language. It basically tells us how we can build websites. So very simple tutorials that you have for HTML. So you should learn it from here. Okay. Now, in this case, I also have the similar tutorials on ITeLearn.com. If you go to online courses and look at this HTML training online, we have some videos on this out here. All right, and it'll also give you a much detailed idea. But then the basic idea that you can learn from W3 Schools is more than sufficient for you to get started. So A is the HTML tag team. A means it's an anchor text or it refers to a link. So if it is a link with an IDE, all I have to say is command is we click on that. Now, should it be click? What does it do? It clicks on a link button and so on. But then, if you remember from our previous version, we use click and wait. Should it be click and wait or click? How do you know? What should it be? It should be click and wait because you also want a new page to load. In this case, when a user clicks on this button, it navigates us to a new page. So it has to go to the new page and we have to say click and wait. That is the command. So you saw how we did a simple record and generated the code. We are doing it ourselves right now by writing it out here. Target here, I can say link equals login. Now let's say find this. Either it should blink and highlight this, or in the log you should say that there is some issue. So let me clear this log which is there earlier and say find again. It says locator not found, link equals login. But didn't our test case 1 work? Link equals login. So why should this not work? What do you think could be an issue? A simple error that we did as a human, that link equals login, the L out here is uppercase L. It is not a lowercase. Now let's click on find. Do you see it highlighting in yellow? These are one of the most valuable simple lessons and concepts that we all need to get a good hold of before we have the capability to move into our WebDriver and more advanced concepts. So click and wait. So after we click and wait, what is it that we want to do? We want to enter some information here called username or so. So for us to be able to work on this username, it's very simple. First, what is the command? What is the target to identify that element? And finally, what is the value that we need to enter? The command in this case is we want to enter some text. So if I say enter, is there anything? No. See, the command itself, if you look at this, it's got the complete list of different commands that you can perform in Selenium IDE. Now, as beginners or learning professionals in this process, am I supposed to master each of these hundreds of steps that are there here? Can you all see this? There's so many steps out here. Should I be able to master each of them? Not necessary. You get the basic idea, understand the top 10-15 commands, what they do, and as the need arises for each and everything, you start using it. In fact, you don't have to focus too much on the commands here. We can go directly into Selenium WebDriver because the commands will change there. I will talk very detailed about Selenium IDE and the difference between WebDriver when we come to that. Team, just letting you know, I do have a hard stop in the next 3-4 minutes. So once I'm done with this, I'll give you some time for questions and then we'll continue tomorrow. So out here, I need to type something. So I'll start writing if there's a command called type. If I'm not sure, do a simple record and then execute it on the application, see what it does, or refer to a test case that is already there. When you're learning, these are the ways that you could do it. So here I'm going to type. That is the command. So is type existing? As soon as you know it's there, it will tell you what it does. Okay. So I need to enter the target for this. So what is the target? Again, right click, inspect element with Firebug. See what is the HTML ID? Input. HTML tag is input. And then ID equals user underscore login. So I can say ID equals user underscore login and say find. See if it finds it, great. What is the value I want to enter? KK. Done. So this is done. Now similarly for the next step, it is type. This case I want to use, let's say, the name attribute. So ID or name should be unique. So let's say name equals, what is the value? PWD. Do you see here? It's PWD. I'll say PWD and say find. Does it find it? Great. What is the value we want to enter? 1, 2, 3 QWD. Finally, we want to click out here. So I'll say click and wait, because it will again load this page or so. What is this? So it is link equals login. Alright. Now let's run it till this step and see how it performs. I'm going to run the entire test case till here and see how it performs. So what does it tell me out here? I ran a test case, but there's one failure and I can see that it is showing red. Unlike last time when it showed me green, it is showing me red right now. So if I go into log and see, it says test case fail. And it tells me that open app, that was fine, click and wait was fine, type was okay, this was okay, click and wait link equals login failed, element link equals login not found. Why is it not found? Can you and I see it? It entered KK and it also seems to be entering a 6-character thing, which is 1, 2, 3 QWE, and it could not click on login. Why? This is link equals login, right? How do we know? Find. Does it find anything? Hey, it cannot find, but it worked here, it is not working here. And if you notice in this execution, it also shows green, light green for each of them, and a pink, a little reddish out here. You can never assume that if an element is a link, a button, a text or whatever, because with the latest CSS and the way the presentation is done, or the UI UX, user interface or user experience is created on web pages, you can never assume what kind of a element that is. So the way you have to do is right click on it, inspect element with Firebug and see. You notice now, team, it says button and class equals submit and so on. So it was not the same. Now in this case, I can write something that is specific to identifying this. How do I do it? I don't have ID attribute. I don't have name. I do not have a link text because it's not linked. Then how do I write a XPath or identifier for this? That is when we use the other alternate ways of identifying using CSS, XPath, or using or one of these two things. Okay. Now the simplest way is to write an XPath, and I will discuss a little bit more about XPath briefly tomorrow, team. XPath has a very simple way. Team. You have two slashes, HTML tag, open square brackets, attribute name equals single quotes attribute value and end of the square brackets. This is the format to write a XPath to identify an element. It's a very simple logical way of doing it. Now let me write an XPath for this specific element out here by looking here. So the first thing is // The second thing is we say what is HTML tag. In this case, right after the less than symbol, what comes up is what we put. And this is button, open square brackets, take any attribute like class or target. These are attributes now. I'll say class equals single quotes submit, end of the square brackets, and let me click on find. Does it find it? I don't know. Let's go to log and see. If you notice out here, it does not find it. It gives me an error. And the reason for it is at the beginning of every XPath that we do, for it to know that it is an attribute name, you have to use the @ symbol. Once we say @ the attribute name and then the value, it recognizes it. So I put @ here, being my application also, and then say find. Now do you see it still does not blink in yellow, but I see something changing here. But it does not give me any error here. So it is able to find. It is probably highlighting it in yellow, but you are not able to see because it was too quick or so. Let's see if this works. Rerun the test and see what happens. There you go. So we've got all green and these are the steps that were executed and the test case has passed. What do we want to do next? The final thing is for us to verify if this text came. Now, it is not easy for me each time to know exactly what is the command to use. What do I do then? I just right click on it and say inspect element with Firebug. It shows me what that element is. But the other feature once you have Selenium IDE installed is right click on it and go to this last one called show all available commands. So for that kind of an element, which is a text, here are the different commands that are available. It says assert title, assert text, verify title, verify text, all these different things. What do we want to do as an English step? We want to verify if a text is there or not. So that is verify text. So we click on that and automatically the step comes to me. It says verify text is the command. You can also look at the reference and see what it does. You can see the CSS way of identifying the target, which you have not yet learned. And finally, what is the text that we want to verify, which is login authentication failed. So if you say find, it should be able to find it. Now let us rerun this test case with these steps. So the first test case was a complete record. The second test case, we did it at our end. So if you notice, the test again is a successful run. There are light green colors out here and then there's a dark color. Whenever you try and verify something, you'll notice that it comes in a dark color. So this is how we do simple Selenium IDE, use simple ways of element identification, and how we go about automating applications using Selenium IDE. This is a starting point for us. Now, if we could do all this, why do we require 25, 30 additional hours to learn automation testing? Is this not sufficient? If today you go into any kind of a automation testing job and you tell them that I'm good at Selenium IDE, they will not consider you as an automation tester because it is too basic. We need ability to be able to program and be able to go very detailed into these aspects. Okay, and that's what we will learn once we get to Selenium WebDriver, programming skills, and this framework concepts, especially using RobotFramework. All right. So these are the main things, team, for a beginner level. What you can do is let's meet tomorrow same time. We'll continue from here and we'll learn remaining part of this. Any questions before we end today's session, please? Can you explain store command? What is store command? I didn't understand. Where is the store command? And honestly, team, if you ask me, I'm not an expert at Selenium IDE. I use it very, very limited. And the reason I use it is because to get started and understand. And then we move significantly into the WebDriver and programming. So the question, another question is, I have a question about your dream project, dream automation framework. So that is a different training from this program. This is focused more on Selenium WebDriver with Python and RobotFramework. That is a complete Selenium WebDriver using core Java, JUnit, and we're building our own custom framework there. The recordings for this session also will be hosted on our website team. If you go to ITeLearn.com and under the online courses, either you will see the new one out here and you can click on this new page. The orientation session and these day 1, day 2 demo sessions will be out here. Okay, so right now there's only one video which is orientation. Once this is uploaded, you will get access to this too. The Selenium IDE, yes, only supports Firefox. How many days will it take to complete all this? I'm looking at about 4 to 5 weeks, team. We'll meet 4 to 5 times each week. The day 3 onwards will continue from next Monday. So today and tomorrow are day 1, day 2. From next Monday onwards will be our day 3 and we'll continue from there on. Access of recordings of the other ongoing project, this is the one you're referring to, should be accessible if you're a premium member. All those videos should be there. So if you go under our Selenium training, right, you will have the access to that. The pricing for this course should be there in the pricing. I will share the exact pricing details and how you can join tomorrow in tomorrow's session, please. This Selenium 3 is as a version is just Notion, but Selenium WebDriver version that is. So what WebDriver do we use? We're going to use the latest one that is available at seleniumhq.org. So we're going to always use the latest ones. All right. Awesome, team. So this is the start for our day 1. I wanted to make sure that we have a specific agenda and we cover the specific topics. When we meet tomorrow, we'll look at some more advanced ways and of how we can do it. And you should definitely start watching the video again and start practicing if you have time. And I'm sure once we get through the day 3, 4, and 5, things will become much more faster and advanced. So at that time, you'll really need to catch up on things. Do we need to learn both Java and Python? Not necessarily, team. You can use any one of those platforms. You don't have to use to learn everything. But the good thing is once you learn one, it will become easy for the others. So if you look at the formats, you will see that you can learn Selenium WebDriver using C# or Java with JUnit or TestNG or Python or Ruby on Rails. These are the different programming aspects. We'll look at that hopefully tomorrow. Thank you everyone. Thank you so much. We'll see you back tomorrow then. Take care all. Bye now.